Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
Great. On today's show, we are joined by one of Vancouver's most successful restaurateurs and entrepreneurs. In an industry with alarmingly high fail rates, she has found a formula of creating influential restaurants that possess both the longevity and community connection required to be considered prominent institutions in the city. She founded Medina Cafe, the Dirty Apron Cooking School, which I absolutely love, and the iconic Chambar restaurant. She has since taken her expertise outside of the industry and currently sits on the board of advisors for the Vancouver Economic Commission and the project director for Vancouver Innovation Capital. I'm super excited to have you join us today, Karri Schuermans. Thank you for being on the show today.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start by talking about being carbon neutral. I'm going to dive right into it. You told me when we spoke yesterday before you came in that Chambar, I believe, is the first carbon neutral restaurant in Vancouver. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we were the first or second. There was a wood fire pizza place that may have beaten us to it, but yeah, that was back in 2006, 7.
When you became carbon neutral. So talk to me about how you became a carbon neutral restaurant, because I'm assuming you must be burning some kind of fuels to cook your food and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you can dive into that for us.
Yeah, it was like a step-by-step of going through every single aspect in and out of the restaurant. And a lot of it came up because of the way that food was being delivered to us. That when we first opened, we were getting these stacks of styrofoam containers for the seafood. And we just said no. We had to get to the point where we had the volume that they wanted our business. And we just said no. Can you switch to Rubbermaid containers? Which has been amazing because now all the suppliers have realized that it's far more economical to do that. Like our meat suppliers, and just said, you come here all the time anyway, so you can drop off and pick up because we're not going to accept styrofoam.
Good for you.
And then cardboard, we just push back.
Yeah.
It just creates so much labor and waste for nothing.
So this started off with suppliers. So you were mentioning seafood suppliers. They were bringing the seafood products, so I guess like scallops and fish and prawns in styrofoam containers that they were just going to be disposed of. They just get thrown out.
Yeah, and we just said no.
And so how do they do it now? You said it's in
for example, we bring mussels in fresh every day. They're harvested, transport. We have them the next day or the following day.
Okay.
And so they come in Rubbermaid containers, on ice. So there's no health safety issues. There's no difference from the styrofoam. They're bringing them from a refrigerated truck into a refrigerator, so there's no...
This is the analogy of like a single-use plastic bag versus coming to the grocery store with your reusable bag.
Yeah.
Well, that's neat, but I'm assuming that's not all you had to do to become carbon neutral. That's probably just the beginning?
No, probably the biggest win was the food waste composting.
Okay.
So there wasn't anybody separating food waste at that point.
Yeah.
So it took a while.
It's amazing to think that it wasn't that long ago.
No.
That composting was not even thought of by most people.
Yeah, and a lot of, the composting is really kind of what set me on the path to where I am now, which is interesting. But realizing the tons of food waste that we're going to landfill and the methane that creates, and really understanding that.
Yeah.
My dad's farmer, so he's invented this composting contraption to take green waste into become organic fertilizer. So I understood the process well enough.
Yeah.
And when we were able to go through the process, which took about a year to get it through the city, because even though they had this green initiative of being the greenest city 2020, the guys who were doing the bylaws, they're like, no, you're over by 2 feet. You can't have 2 bins. So just going through the process with suppliers to say, okay, can you weld your bins so there's no leakage? Where can I find compostable heavy-duty garbage bags? Because you can't dump that amount of food waste in a big bin. And going through that whole process, but it diverted 33 tons a year.
33 tons. Well, you know what? Let's come back to this for a minute. I think for the average person like myself that doesn't work in the hospitality business, it'd be good to get a perspective of how much volume you do, and I don't know if you can speak to any of those kind of numbers, like the amount of food that you produce. like at Chambar, first of all, how many people can you serve in a night there on a Friday or Saturday night?
We have 270 seats,
Yeah.
and we'll often do 3 turns.
3 turns.
And then in the summer, we have an extra 45 seats on the patio.
Wow. So if you think about, so let me just pull out, like, for example, like bottles of wine. Like, how many bottles of wine do you go through in like a week? You have any idea?
It depends how lush people are feeling.
Yeah. Is it better? I guess imagine during Christmas time, people are a little more.
Yeah, I couldn't even give you a number of the number of bottles that we're going through.
And then when those bottles are finished, I'm assuming they get recycled?
Yeah, there's a collection service,
Yeah.
and then all of that, they collect and then get the deposits for it and give us a percent kickback for it.
Yeah. What if you weren't conscious about the food waste, if you were just a average restaurant trying to just make a buck and didn't really care about all that stuff, what do most restaurants do with their food waste? Because it amazes me. I always eat all the food on my plate unless I really don't like it. I was told by my mom not to waste food, but
Yeah,
I know I see a lot of. I eat a lot, and I see people all the time leaving tons of food on their plate. Where does all that go in a typical restaurant?
It either goes into the garbage, but now the restaurants are required to separate the food waste so that it goes to compost.
Well, that's finally a legislated rule. Is that a bylaw?
Yeah.
Or is it? Oh, that's not a provincial rule. That's a Vancouver city. And when did that come into place?
Almost 2 years ago.
But you guys have been doing this way before that.
Yeah.
And did you have any influence in that?
It was working through them to say your bylaws are preventing you from the intentions you're trying to set, and just from going through becoming carbon neutral, and realizing that was the most significant impact, that it made sense.
Okay.
So it was about providing them to say, okay, if you're going to do this, you better do it staggered.
Yeah.
And so it was working with people at the city to say, okay, who are the suppliers that you would need to do this, and what are the challenges around like buildings. Being able to say, yeah, we're okay to have compost, because then you could have rodent issues if it's not got done correctly. So there's this, like, you have to get rid of the levers and the barriers to entry for it to be successful. So it was well thought out and staggered in the way.
Now, are other municipalities, to best of your knowledge, are they doing the same thing? Like if I go to a restaurant in Burnaby or in Richmond or North Shore, do you know whether they're required to also compost? Or?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So before 2 years ago, again, going back to that restaurant who wasn't really concerned about food waste, environment, that type of thing, what would they do? They would just throw it in the garbage?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so essentially that's going to landfill, and then that's becoming your release. It's like, here's this great source of energy that you're just releasing as an emission.
Yeah.
So, the next step on that for the food waste was realizing that where we were sending it, or where it was going in North Vancouver, which is landscaping, so it was turned into landscaping soil, that if the whole city went, like the economics of it is, what if we have volume of all the restaurants, that there wasn't anywhere for it to go. So there was talk of doing methane plant. Where would that be? Then how far would you have to travel? And you have to make sure that the cost for pickup isn't, and that whole process isn't higher than just putting it in the garbage to make sure. So it was a thoughtful process.
So how does it work today at Chambar? You get to the end of a night on a busy Saturday night, and there's all this food waste, and you've got these bins that you've had custom made. Does the city of Vancouver come and pick it up for you, like
no,
curbside?
It's contract suppliers.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's food. It's like waste.
So it's on your responsibility. So you're required regulatory wise to not allowed. You're not allowed to put it in the garbage, but it is on you to have it picked up and taken away.
Yeah.
Does the city regulate as to who picks it up or where it goes or what it's used for?
Where it goes, but not what it's used for. And I think the main issue is what to do with that.
Yeah.
And could that be there's a great opportunity for it to be a major energy source.
So Karri, what happens with your food waste? Where does it go?
At the moment, it's going to North Vancouver.
For this landscaping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's various locations in the city, but a lot of it's going all the way out to Delta.
Yeah. And going back to that number you gave about the amount of food waste that you save, how much did you say that number was again?
33 tons.
33 tons.
Yeah.
A year.
That's all your mussel shells, bones, trimmings. So when we moved to the new location, a lot of doing the design for the new restaurant was how can we reduce not only the way that we receive food, but reduce waste. So we portion, and if we find, we'll track that if we find it's being thrown away a lot, there's extra, we'll reportion it to account for that. And then we built larger freezer and fridge space. Like our fridge is the size of a small apartment.
Really?
So that a supplier, a producer can come, like we work with a guy that brings tomatoes, and he organizes them in ripeness by box so that he only has to come once a week rather than every day.
Okay.
A lot of people don't have the space. And so we're like, well, if we have the space, we could cut down the amount of output here. And we use everything. Like we make our own stocks. So the amount of waste that we have is minuscule to large restaurants our size.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not like a KFC, which is everything's just getting shipped in rectangular boxes and then open it up. Let's talk about Chambar for a minute. Let's do a plug for your restaurant and pull up their website there, Ross, so we can take a look. I'm assuming you have some pictures on your website. Let's talk about the history of Chambar. You were one of the founders of Chambar?
Yeah, Nico and I started it in 2004. We'd been in Vancouver a year. We'd been living in Sydney before that with a ski season in between in Whistler, being ski bums. And we saw this opportunity. There was all these amazing, beautiful, fine dining restaurants that were very conservative and quite elitist. And then there was chain restaurants that had an incredible caliber of service for chain restaurants compared to other places in the world, and then a lot of ethnic foods. And we felt that where there was a space to create like a really fun, like fine dining quality and service, but a really relaxed, laid back atmosphere where could you go and educate yourself about food without feeling like I got to sit up straight, use the right fork, the music is boring, and it looks like my grandma's living room in here. So how do we make this like fun? And so the name Chambar comes from an old French phrase, which means when the teacher leaves the room and all the kids go crazy.
Oh, really?
So that was our whole start of like, how do we make it really fun? And being in Australia, the cocktail scene is really big. And so there's a lot of more kind of debauchery around like eating out, that how could we make it more of a fun place to be? And at that time, it was really constrictive. Vancouver was definitely no fun city. And we, coined... There was this book called Stanley Park that talked about this place called Crosstown, and we were in this no-go zone. Like everybody considered us downtown east side, but we just didn't want to go in with the burn rate of Yale Town prices at that time. Sure. So we're like, okay, I went and looked at all the city development plans and saw what was happening. I'm like, within 2 years, there's going to be another 4,000 units within this area. So this is the spot. And also the feature of the building, that it was like nice old European style, lots of brick and big fir beams, that it had character already. Yeah. Because most of the city is pretty shiny and new.
Yeah. So let's make sure all the listeners know where, if they want to go eat at Chambar, it's just down from the SkyTrain station on, which street is that?
It's Beatty and Dunsmuir.
Beatty and Dunsmuir.
And it's the Stadium SkyTrain station. We're right there, next door.
Yeah. Now you're in a new location. I'm still going to call it new. I think you've been there a few
5 years
now. 5 years now? Has it been 5 years?
Yeah.
When did Chambar first open?
2004.
So you opened your doors in 2004. You were just down, like the same building, were you not? Just
next
down
building. Yeah.
Next
door.
building.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what precipitated moving from that building in the old location to the one you're in today? And we see some of the picture. This is the new location, as we see here.
Yeah.
Which nice wood and lots of nice bright lights. What made that? What was it that caused that move?
We were approached by the owners of who bought the building next to us, which used to be just for filming. Like, I think they didn't keep up with their permits, so it was being used for filming. Like Da Vinci's Inquest was filmed there, so that crew was all around. Yeah. When we opened, which was like nice to be part of that little history. And we were originally going to do another concept in there. We already had most of the street, so why not one more? Right. And then things happened for us personally. My dad was given a couple months to live, and we just went, wait a minute, like why do we keep opening more? And so it was more of a personal reflection to say, okay, why do we keep opening new places? And then realizing, okay, if you want to physically manifest your values in the world, maybe this isn't the right tool. It's not big enough, but this is our livelihood and we love it, and the culture of it is great. And this is his passion and this is his art. So we were like, why don't we just do one thing really well? So the move was more, if we go to a larger location, then we can afford to have somebody run the operations. and maybe we won't make more money, but we can have a life. And our kids were young. We have 3 kids.
Right.
And so all of that was happening at the same time, which really was, we're like, okay, let's go all in again and hope this works.
So effectively you upgraded, moved to locations. How many seats did you have in your old restaurant versus this one?
We had 80.
80. And now you're at
270.
270.
So we doubled the
that's
size.
Big.
Yeah.
Doubled. Yeah, that's amazing. That's actually more than tripled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you. And has it worked out well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you
Thankfully.
getting
I'm
more
very
time
grateful.
getting more time with your boys?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
You built the first location too, right? Like.
Yeah, we did our own contracting for the first one.
Like
we
family
had
and friends type
yeah,
thing,
my
right?
dad came I was like, Dad, I don't have anybody. My dad's a carpenter and builds homes. I'm like, there's nobody that I trust. Like, I can't find anybody who has this like detail and care for the finishing details. Can you come and help? And so he was going to come for 3 weeks and help us out. It ended up being 3 months. He basically helped us build the place. But all the tables that are in, all the tables in the restaurant he built. And so he just made more for the new restaurant. So it's a nice thing to like
That's
have
really
something
cool.
that he made.
Yeah.
Because he's such a perfectionist, which I totally appreciate.
Was he involved in the second? When you refit the second place, was he involved there too?
No, it was a clear no.
Yeah. I don't blame him. Big
Wow.
job, right?
He just kept saying, "Tell us when you're opening," and he came out, a few days before.
Yeah.
Smart.
Well, that's really neat. One of the things I love to talk about when I get entrepreneurs like yourself in the studio here is to talk about how you got started, because I think that it's most of the time, it's always seems to be a great story for budding entrepreneurs, people who are maybe struggling right now themselves and need that little bit of inspiration to keep going. And maybe we can help them also learn some lessons of things they shouldn't make. They can learn off of somebody else's. The best lesson to learn is off someone else's mistakes, right? Can you start off by telling us how did this thing start at the very beginning? You and Nico, this is your husband?
Ex-husband now, but
okay.
we're still in business and parenting together.
Okay, so before you had kids,
Yeah.
you decided to start this up. Is that right?
Yeah, it was more. I mean, initially I had this clothing line
Yeah.
called Twice Shy. We were doing this organic clothing, and I'd come from Whistler. My background was marketing. I'd worked in corporate. I was hell-bent on getting to the corner office.
Oh, yeah?
And then got there and went, oh, I don't know if I want to be here, actually.
Yeah.
Like, here's all these people that I wanted to be. Here's my, power suit and designer shoes. And here's all these people making decisions against their own personal values. And they've got big houses and they don't see their friends or their family, and they're miserable.
Yeah.
And I just went, I don't know, this isn't what I thought it would be, or maybe I should have asked why I wanted to be here before I went on this route.
Well, that's the journey you go down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do in your typically early 20s and 30s so.
Yeah, and I ended up working for the City of Sydney when they went through a competitive tendering process. So all of the services were
And when
up
you
against
mention Sydney, are you talking Sydney, Australia?
Sydney, Australia.
Okay, Australia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so all of the services went through this competitive tendering process. And so I went around with consultants to every single service. So really got an understanding of the city and how it worked. And then became the marketing manager once those services were established as an entity owned by the city. So it was a corporation owned by the city. They privatized their building services. Brilliant. Way to fast track all the building that needs to be done for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And then I ran the international film media for the Olympics, which was completely over my head, but managed to pull it off.
Wow.
And then that's when I was like, I've moved so fast and learned so much that I think I need this amount of information and experience just to integrate to figure out where I want to go next.
Yeah.
And thought that the perfect place to do that would be on a ski hill. So came to Whistler, which was going to be 1 season and turned into 2. And then 9/11 happened and just everything changed. So we ended up moving to Vancouver. And Nico was really interested in having his own restaurant. And I was like, I have all the business, marketing, everything that we need that you don't to do this. So let's open a restaurant, thinking, I'll get it up and running for him and then continue on.
Yeah.
So 15 years later.
15 years. Wow. Crazy. And was Nico with you when you were in Australia?
Yeah.
And
we met.
You guys,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's so you must have gone through some struggles at the beginning. Most people don't go into the restaurant business eyes wide open and know what they're getting into. And
absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, we signed a lease, and I'd written a business plan. I just locked myself away for 2 months and just did the business plan and got it. Because I think the best advice I got was, don't ever think you can't fail. So I didn't really know the industry. I'd worked in a bar when I was at university.
Yeah.
And so all I was like, I need to know all the places you can fail, which in a restaurant is thousands, really.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was like, I really need to understand
as an accountant
it.
in the end, for most of her career as an accountant in the hospitality business, working for restaurateurs. And the fail rate was very, very high. Very high. I see a note here that you started off with a $5,000 pre-approved credit card to get things going.
Yeah, so
Can you talk about that?
We signed the lease. I had the business plan.
Yeah.
And then I went and hit it to raise the money that we needed to open the restaurant. The banks were like, no chance. Like, you don't own anything, you're young. And I think at the time, it's not the case now, restaurants and garden centers were blacklisted. So, bank after bank, they're like, no chance. So hit it and was able to raise the money privately, which is like such an interesting process, because it's like, why do people invest in restaurants? Like, it's either ego or greed.
Right.
But considering like 1 in 5 fail within,
but
I
you
think,
managed
2
to
years.
do it.
Yeah, we managed to pull it off. I mean, it was...
Did you have a lot of investors or just a couple, like really
way too many.
Way too many.
Like, we had everything from 2,000 to 50,000.
Really? Yeah. How much does Chambar look like today compared to its origination? Like if you look at the first year, as far as the menu's concerned, its culture, its personality, like how much has the restaurant changed?
I mean, the original like mission statement and vision still holds today, which
what is that?
You can read it on the website.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's more that, I mean, the essence of it still remains, of what we intended to do, and the heart of it. And moving to the new location, the heart just got bigger.
Yeah.
But it was more about what we intended to be and navigate through, even though it's strange to be in a position where we were the ones that were the innovators and now we're an institution. Mm-hmm. And accepting that is not always easy, because you're like, oh, actually people want us to be consistent. The food has evolved tremendously. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's in the style of people eat. People don't eat so heavily.
Right.
But the flavor profile, Nico has it's like his language and art is the spices and flavors that he combines and uses. It's like these 11 different kind of secrets.
Yeah.
They're not so secret, but that he does of the way he cooks. But it's about having respect for French process, and then an influence of Middle Eastern and North African flavors. And most people said, oh, this will never fly. Like, this menu's too bold. People are really bland. They just want West Coast. And we said, we don't think so.
Yeah. Well, you've proven wrong. Now, what would you do if someone had never heard of Chambar before, they're new to Vancouver, and they heard about this restaurant? How would you describe the restaurant in short term of because people say, oh, is it Italian? Is it French? Is it Asian fusion? What would you describe in kind of layman's terms as Chambar as a type? Where would you fit yourself?
I mean, we are so intent on being specifically vague. It's like we didn't want to be slotted into this fusion French.
So I can't find
like all
Yelp
these names are like continental. I mean,
Yeah.
we put Belgian because Nico's Belgian.
Yeah.
Because there was no Belgian restaurant in Vancouver, and it was a way to get like a category in the Yellow Pages at the time. But we took it off quickly because a lot of French people were really upset when they would come and it wasn't Belgian enough, and we'd get Flemish hate mail, which I had to get translated.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
But yeah, definitely like French based, but it's about with bold flavors, and it's like the place that locals take visitors.
It is. I mean, it's a great restaurant. My wife and I have been there many times. So let's talk a bit about the menu. How much does your menu change?
There's usually something changing every 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we're committed to using.
Is your menu online, by the way?
Yeah. So the new location is expanded because we are open for breakfast all the way through dinner. So we're open from 8 a.m. till sometimes 2 p.m.
Yeah. When did you get into breakfast?
Well, we were in the Medina was basically Chambar by day, so it was one kitchen that cooked for Medina by day and then Chambar by night. It was a shared kitchen, and then moving into the new location, it was a prerequisite of taking that lease because we were the anchor tenant.
Oh, I see. So they want to know that there's a place open available for customers to come and dine.
Yeah, like if you've got a law firm above, they want to know that they can come have lunch there. So that was a bonus for coming into the building.
The reason I was asking that question, I'd be curious to know I guess it sounds like you've been doing breakfast since day one, but I remember when McDonald's got into the breakfast game. Now this is going back quite a while ago, but when I actually worked at McDonald's when I was in grade 9. And I also used to study about it, read about it a lot in business school. And it really upped their profitability because they had all these sunk costs already. They had the lease, they had the staff, they had all the equipment, and then they get into the breakfast game, and all of a sudden it went up big time. Like it did the same with sort of happened with Tim Hortons. I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, it's not so much the case for our style of restaurant.
It's not? Okay.
No, and it was more that we were required to do that, and I don't know that we'd have to anymore, but now it was a slow build. First because people didn't associate Chambar with breakfast and lunch. Yeah. So we weren't top of mind, so there was a lot of work to get people to think of us for that way. Once people come, they come back, which is great. But the amount, like for a McDonald's versus a sit-down service restaurant, I mean, for instance, Chambar has 150 staff. So the amount of seats and food and revenue versus the number of the labor that you have for a restaurant our size, you need a base staff. So the smaller the restaurant, the less the base staff. So your burn rate is much higher to be opening for breakfast, lunch. So if you're not busy, it can take you down. Yeah.
This has got to be a really tough business to keep a profitable operation going, I got to imagine.
The profit, there's so many items. There's so many ways you can lose money. Yeah. I think like having a business background is helpful, and and also having that experience to know how to figure things out. But we have like an integrated inventory cost control system. So for every dish, everything's measured and weighed, and so we get here's the difference in cost report based on what's sold, what you should have when you do your inventory. So we can look and say, we can say this is being overportioned, or the cost of this has gone high, so we have to rework it. Mm-hmm. So that's a constant. And it's more about creating a dashboard of the information that would probably keep me up at night if I didn't have.
Speaking of dashboard, has technology become a component to the restaurant industry? Like I remember years ago, it was like when Squirrel had their, I don't even call those their systems to run your bill and whatnot. But I see a lot of restaurants are now using iPads and whatnot. But is technology had any influence in your
unfortunately
business?
The technology that would make it really good is not there yet because the locations aren't specific enough. So for instance, having the POS systems and not having to write out manual bills obviously saves a lot of time and probably is responsible for getting another turn of business in. Mm-hmm. But there is technology. We really push back because for the experience of it, and people's like, oh, can I sit over there? And so we'd have to manually update. Like, there's just no way. Right. So until the location can get perfect, then that we can't move to that technology.
What about the back end of the restaurant? Like as far as maybe more technological changes with respect to like equipment and that kind. I used to be a ceramics technician at Milestones during college years. I don't know if you know what that is, but people would call me a dish pig, but I put it on my resume as a ceramics technician.
I had no idea what you were saying at that point.
Yeah. Me too. I've never heard of that.
You ever heard of that one? Really? I was the only one that came up with that? It looked great on my resume because I'd always get asked.
I'm going to re-advertise that and see how many people show up for work. It might be easier than getting dishwashers.
But has there been any changes in that sense as far as actually, Ross, were you the one who was telling about the Sue? Was that the Sue cooking system? Weren't you the one telling me that?
Oh, like sous vide?
Sous vide?
Sous vide. It's when you cook in plastic. But we're just we really don't want to put food in plastic and then cook it. Like the thing is you have such good control and so you can create this. But there's something nice about like searing it, creating like browning something. Sure. And what you can get in, whether it's salt or spices or something. Like there's something in that adds more flavor rather than putting everything. I mean, it's like a plastic crock pot almost. Right. Yeah. And we're like, no, we just don't want to it's going against our values of sustainability to go through that much plastic.
Yeah. How are your grills fired? Are they wood fired?
It's propane, like it's LNG. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we in part of that composting thing, there was this initiative called Cow Power, and it was to try and get dairy farmers to build these methane plants, and they'd set up all the financing for it, and then that we could add our food waste, and then all of the green waste and food waste would become green gas. So then Fortis had said, well, if you can go and get businesses to pay more to prove that they're willing to pay for green gas, then we'll switch over to that. And the timing just didn't work out, unfortunately, but that would have been a good option.
Yeah. Well, maybe some point in the future. The world is still at early stages of this transition.
Yeah, Germany's doing it. They're taking their renewable energy and using existing infrastructure to transport green gas.
Yeah. Let's go back to you mentioned you employ 150 people and running a restaurant business. Can we go back to that listener who's maybe running their own restaurant right now or thinking about getting into it and talk about some of the common mistakes that you see other people making or mistakes that you made that you might want to help enlighten people on, like, hey, if you're going down this path, go this direction, because going down that path isn't going to be the right way to go.
Cash flow.
Yeah,
I think
are cost controls really important?
Yeah, they are, because there's so many. It's easy to slow bleed out, which relates back to cash flow. But so many people go into the restaurant industry because they're so passionate about food, or they're a chef and they don't have business experience. And either, if you don't have it, at least learn, self-teach, because that's what you end up doing, so that you can at least hire good people to do that for you. Having a really good handle on financial management is key.
I'm sure we all had this experience where, like that local restaurant somewhere that just constantly is changing owners and names. And then there's one like 2 blocks down the street, and it's been an institution like Chambar for years. And I've always wondered, like, what differentiates that? Like, what they're location-wise, maybe not even 2 blocks, maybe they're just like literally 2 units over. You've got a restaurant like Chambar who manages to stay in business and run a good restaurant for years, and then a couple blocks down the street you got another place and just constant turnover. What is your observation as someone who's clearly been able to be successful in this business that makes you different from so many of your so-called competitors?
I think it's like concept execution. Like, it's all about the execution, because I could say to somebody, here's my business plan, here's design, like, here's everything. And it's all about the execution. And I think I would say the largest contribution to our success has been the culture, creating a culture. Like, if people are going to spend that many hours a day at work, then they should enjoy who they work with. And a lot of that shifted by having a tip pool, by having ethics and core values that we ask people to read and sign when they come on as an employee, to say, like, if this is how we are here, and if this doesn't fit with you, it's fine. But
well, this is really neat. So can we talk about those 2 things a little bit? Let's talk about this values, ethics that you have people sign. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about what that is? And do most of the restaurants do that? I don't imagine they do.
I don't think so. I mean, it's in the About Us section.
This is kind of, I guess, speaking to the idea of culture. This is a way for you to ensure that you're setting a standard for anybody coming in new to understand about what's important to you.
Yeah, a lot of putting this down on paper came from when we moved to the new location.
Yeah. Because
we went from having these 3 businesses with like 60 staff and under. So we had a total of around 150 staff between the 3 businesses. But when you put them all in one, you're maxing out your communication. Like military, as soon as it's 150, or Mennonite communities, they split it into 75. So how do we deal with this maxing out? So a lot of that was making use of technology for the communications, of how to inform people about what's going on and reduce the amount of when do I work, like making it all available to people. I happen to be studying ethics. So a lot of it came of, like, if we're, technology's driving us, but what we actually need to do is raise the ethic. So a lot of it was just my personal, like, learning and journey that took me to this, of realizing that we have so many people coming from so many different backgrounds, and they're like indoctrination of growing up or money or anything, is that the way we define things are completely different and what words mean to us. So it was about saying what do we believe in, like what are our values, and then also saying this is how we define each of these words so that we're all on the same page.
Okay.
And it made it much easier because now people self-manage each other, because it gives them tools to say, like, I don't feel respected when, or they can draw on this to actually.
Absolutely.
So the amount of like babysitting drama really went down because people have something to say. This isn't a rule. Like, you have rules in a business, but these are kind of like guidelines that give you.
I love it. This is what we're looking at right now. So you've got respect, generosity, excellence. What else do you have on there? Honesty and integrity. So yeah, it's great. It gives a guideline. I mean, it's a great way to sort of set a standard so that people showing up new know what to expect and know how they conduct themselves.
Yeah, and it's not even it's more for us internally, because it gives a roadmap for people to make decisions by. Yeah. And it really enables people to like be empowered to make their own decisions without having to ask you. So it's saying, if I'm not in the restaurant 24/7, it's much easier for your presence to be the directive. Like, it's clear what your expectations are, and if you're not going to be there every second of the day, how do you keep that going? Yeah. So it was more of, how do you scale the culture without having to be the culture? Yeah. Because
so would you say this is an important part of what's helped you be successful?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, you also mentioned tip pool.
Yeah.
Now, again, for people who haven't worked in the restaurant industry, and this is something that I think is a really good topic to get into, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, about like how much people should tip. And I can give you my view in a minute, but let's start off by telling, what did you do before? What is a tip pool, and what did you do before, and why is a tip pool better for your culture now?
So I mean, we've been living in Australia. There's no tipping there. People are paid more by the hour. Okay. The cost is basically passed on in. It's far more expensive to eat out there because you're paying for that. Yeah. But where they are geographically, their produce is way cheaper than ours, because obviously they can grow food all year round and they don't freeze over for most of the year. Yeah. And also, so much of our local food is gone because the cannabis industry has taken over all the greenhouses. So we're having a really hard time keeping our commitment to using local produce.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's like little lack of consideration, or
really?
Yeah.
So this must have been a big change for you guys as cannabis has become legalized, I guess, for about 1.5 years now. So that's really made a big difference on
huge. Like we'd made a commitment to using local seasonal produce, and we can't get it.
So where are you getting your food from now?
Wherever we can get it, as close as we can. But sometimes it's coming from Mexico. So you're like, well, what's the carbon footprint of that versus being able to get something that's coming from Delta? Yeah. So
amazing. It's interesting because I noticed that Whole Foods, which of course is now owned by Amazon, was, I thought, doing a pretty good job of continuing to showcase or offer local produce, vegetables and fruits when they're seasonally open. And I've noticed less and less of it now. And I was wondering if it's just Whole Foods now kind of making that move towards, being able to use your Amazon app and you just get your strawberries from Oxnard, California, where they all get grown in mass quantity. Or maybe it's also a function of they don't have the supply anymore because the cannabis business, I don't know.
I would say it's more that's just not their MO. Yeah. I mean, Whole Foods was a place where they would have a lot of interesting produce, and the people that worked there really cared about finding and sourcing. And so the whole business, the way that was set up, and there's hardly any organic food there. Yeah. The amount of produce available is, like, sometimes you go in there and there's nothing in there. Yeah. But Whole Foods was a place where chefs would often go, like Nico would often go to Whole Foods and find interesting things, because they would bring in not your basic banana, tomato, potato, orange, and they would bring in really interesting things that he could try out and play with. And that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
I know some reports have come out recently that the prices at Whole Foods, generally speaking, have dropped. I know bananas in particular, pardon me, but it's come at a cost for sure. Of less diversity, definitely. I still shop with my wife, and I try and go to the farmer's market as much as we can. Do you guys ever shop at the farmer's market, or do you?
Personally,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I guess as a restaurant, you can't really do that. You gotta. I guess you could go direct to some of the farmers. Like for example,
we go direct to farmers.
Like if you have kale, kale kind of grows year round. It's pretty hardy. So if I'm eating kale off of a plate of food at Chambar,
it's local.
It's local.
Yeah.
So you have regulars that you kind of start to get to know. What are you best known? What's Chambar best known for? Do you have anything that you kind of people in the street know? Yeah, if you want to try this, you got to go to Chambar.
I mean, the mussels are like, because they're so like we go through like 200 pounds.
200 pounds of mussels
a day.
A day.
So we get like the best fresh. I mean, the issue for us is longevity of that is a little bit unknown, because we have to get mussels for wherever there's a cold current. Because as soon as it warms up, you get that red tide, then the diocin, and that's when people get sick.
Yeah.
So it has to always be coming from cold water. So will mussels be around forever? Probably not. But there's places, like there's a place near San Juan where we get them, where there's a consistent cold current, so that you're guaranteed that.
Yeah.
I mean, the only things that have been on our menu since the start are the mussels, the mille frites, because that's a very traditional Belgian dish, and we couldn't take it off now. People freak out.
Are your fries good?
Yeah.
How do you?
I mean, they're all
fries?
hand cut. We had to work with Alberta Potato Board to make sure that the potatoes that come to us are all from the same area.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the sugar content's different, and some will be like raw and some will be really floppy by the time you cook them.
Yeah.
So to get that consistency, we've had to do a lot of work as we've scaled in volume.
So where do your
to be able to
potatoes
work.
come from?
Alberta.
Whereabouts?
Mostly like Tabor.
Really?
Tabor area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever go out to your suppliers' locations and see where your food's coming from?
Yeah, and like either mussels or, we worked when
who's your main supplier for mussels?
We have a company near San Juan's that we get from, and then we have a I don't know the name of them right now. I should.
You mentioned earlier there was a farm in for your kale. I think you were talking about. Or something.
Well, all of our greens. Yeah, our
Where
Farmer Paul guy.
Farmer Paul.
Yeah.
Does he
Everyone knows who he is.
Shoeless guy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
And I mean, it's we move around suppliers depending on the season.
Yeah.
But it's been. I mean, that's probably one of the most pleasurable part of having a restaurant is being able to get to know the people that are providing what you're serving, because there's so much that goes into what goes on your plate. And if we could get people to just pause and appreciate, like, wait a minute, there's like all these ingredients that came from somewhere that someone grew, and what it took to get here, and then prepared, and all the different ways that you prepare each part of your dish. Yeah. I mean, we did a collaboration with Laughing Stock before they sold, and just to go there and do harvest with them, and they're like the beautiful land, and get a sense of place of where what we have on the menu comes from, that's probably one of the greatest like bonuses of having a restaurant.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat.